On this episode of Robe Chats, the podcast,
bands will come and go, but they're always going to need production people. It needs to be forward-thinking, and it needs to be thought-provoking, and it also needs to be communal. We're about vibe.
from the Live Production Summit, Chris Musgrave. Welcome back to Robe Chats, the podcast. My name is Brian Matthews. I'm your host once again, and as you can see, we are broadcasting today from the National Association of Broadcasters, NAB Expo here in Las Vegas. My first time here. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by Mr. Chris Musgrave from the Live Production Summit. Chris, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
I'm humbled I was asked.
Is this your first? We'll just start here as we're sitting here on the NAB show floor. You often come to NAB, first time here, or are you
not
a
my
frequent
first
visitor?
time, but I can't say too often. But this year I was expecting some innovation to be shown. So it's one of those, any conference like this that's tech centric. There's periods of time when you're expecting okay, we're going to see some stuff here, and obviously with AI is the talk of the moment right now. And I was really curious to see where ownership lies with that, how people are approaching that side of the tech. Yeah. So and I'm also always here to see new innovations or different utilization of existing tech, that not only my clients can utilize, but also could be a part of possibly of the LPS conversations.
Right. Well, let's just kind of get into a little bit for people who may not know. Let's talk a little bit first because I do want to talk about Live Production Summit.
Sure.
I went and was actually a part of that this year and got to go out. So I had a really great time. So we will get to that, but kind of just jump us back a little bit, a few years back, if you will, and kind of, just give our listeners and our watchers here,
Sure.
How did you get started in this industry? What was it that looped you into this crazy world that we all live in?
I was fortunate enough to be raised in the Malibu Mountains in LA. And I'm a product, I was born obviously in, early days. And I came up through the period of the 80s on the Sunset Strip in LA. And me and a few friends made a poor decision one night, and the Rainbow Bar and Grill, a lot of people are familiar with it. We decided late one night, about 3:30 a.m., that we were going to go in and we were going to have a couple of drinks.
Were you invited in?
No. And we did. And the next morning, passed out in the rain, was Mario, the owner. And Mario actually just talked to me for a couple hours and fed me, and turned out my father's an internationally known artist, and he knew who my father was. And, certain parts of that area were kind of small back in the day. And then he called down to Bill Gazzari's on the Strip. And I got a job at Gazzari's. And that's where it started. And I quickly was taught, that bands will come and go, but they're always going to need production people.
Yeah.
And the idea of being a rock star or all that didn't interest me that much. But I was always a Toys R Us kid.
Yeah.
And you don't know as a kid. And the one thing that can never be taught is gumption or tenacity, however you want to call it. So you don't know until you get in that room and experience it, if you're an audio person, a video person, or a lighting person, which one grabs you. It was always audio for me.
Yeah.
Always audio. So that was the path I took. And I went on to become a TM, PM front of house. And I've been lucky enough to work with some incredible artists through the years.
People always say you don't notice audio until you notice audio. So kind of give me those.
You mean you don't notice it until it's bad, until you have a complaint. Right. But, it's, I equate it to fine art. As a child, I watched a red square on a canvas sell for millions of dollars. My dad, who's heavy in the art game, I asked, well, it's a red square. And my dad said, well, see, that was done in such and such year in this style, and, it was done first, and blah, 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 blah. And I still thought, I don't get it. Audio's the same way. It sounds good to you or it doesn't. Some people like bass heavy, some people are mid, some people like it brighter and crispy, or, whatever it's going to be. So it's really hard to gauge that, unless it's something where you're not hearing the vocals at all, or the snares making you flinch every time, then it's different. But beyond that, it's all speculative to your taste. It's like lighting. Sometimes it can be too much, right?
Yeah.
It's some, if you got the blinders that are constantly going, some people are like, yeah, enough.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to say.
So what kind of transitioned you over? I know now that you're doing the live production summit, what kind of transitioned you out of the touring audio game?
I got old. Look, I've had, a lot of people know I've had multiple heart attacks on tour. 4, actually, or while traveling. So I had started Keep the Beat Alive to train and certify people in AED and CPR, and we gave free AEDs, and we've literally several hundred people have been trained by us, and a lot of AEDs have been handed out. Then I built a triage kit specific for the industry with an AED and everything in it.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was really pushing the safety side, security, and I always joke that it was for selfish reasons. I wanted everybody around me to know how to do CPR and use an AED just to save my dumb ass, right? And the triage kit was born more out of, I would always ask for, I want 6 EMTs. And I'd get pushback, of course, because it's a line item. Oh, Chris, you can get away with 4 or 2. And it's like, well, 2's great until they're on the other side of 25,000 people. And generally, they're not scheduled to come in till doors. And 90% of issues happen at load in or load out, right? That's when the trucks are being unloaded and you got things going on. So I came up with a triage kit that has an AED at the top, and it's got chest seals and skin sutures and staplers and everything you need for heavy bleed and this and that and tourniquets and a number of things that should be first off the truck and last on so that it's there when needed. And I've been trying to push it for years, that safety side, to be a little more conscious of it. Which is where some of the tech is coming now with some of the robotic control that is taking away from needing riggers up there per se. Let's say some of the spotlight stuff, and things like that. So really looking at how that pushes so we can be a little safer and watch out for each other a little bit better on that front.
Yeah.
But I got to the point where I got older. I'd had my health issues and battled back. And the idea of just getting on a bus and into a bunk started getting, it's like, I've been doing this a long time. It was enough.
Yeah.
And, I was fortunate enough and cursed enough that when the transition from TourLink to LPS happened, I was tapped on the shoulder and asked, if I would be involved. And I was very humbled by the request and very happy to take part in it as long as we all agreed on some changes. And those changes were for it to, part of it was the rebranding to Live Production Summit, because we felt that the silos that existed between broadcast, theater, touring, corporate events, they don't really exist anymore.
No, it's all sort of started to get a little bit more blended.
Well, we're using the same tech, right? We're using the same crews. It's the same vendors. So why pigeonhole it?
Right.
The other side for me is always education-based as well. That it had to be forward-thinking about tomorrow, not sitting around telling stories about yesterday. You can do that at any bar you want. Just go to Center Bar. Well, Center Bar doesn't exist anymore, right?
But to the Center
Bar.
But
you know what? Everybody's now considering the one in Resorts World as kind of the new Center Bar, right?
That's what I'm hearing. That's the scuttlebutt.
That's where everybody's kind of congregating. So, but when you look at it,
this ad is not paid for by Resorts World.
It needs to be forward thinking, and it needs to be thought provoking, and it also needs to be communal. Which is why, and I love that Roby's a sponsor. We're very thankful for that. But also, we don't allow sponsors on the panels because it becomes a timeshare pitch.
Right.
So we prefer the panels to stay kind of agnostic, if you will, to the communal. And a lot of people are unaware that the people on our panels are actually just attendees that either reach out and ask or volunteer to be on the panels. They're not paid. We don't fly them in or it's literally run by its attendees and it's run by the community.
Yeah.
Now we have the focused opportunities that allow a sponsor to really have a room, be on the schedule and show what they're doing, because then when you walk in, that that's what I'm going into. And we want to
This is an official sponsored area here.
Yeah. And you were there this year, and we're about vibe. We're about networking, a lot of networking, not tying you up in the rooms. We want you to be able to get out and really enjoy it. But we also have that belief that if we give you food each day, the breakfast and the lunch, and we provide a bunch of open bars, and you're not constantly reaching for your purse or your wallet or what have you to constantly pay and this or that, getting everything squeezed out, your shoulders just drop. You'll engage a little bit better with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because all that's taken off, which is why we go as far as we do on our food and beverage, is to allow people to look, we're going to take care of you. And we really just create the palette for the attendees to come and come look, we put it together, come and use it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And run through it.
I really did enjoy it. That's the vibe that I got, because this was the first time that I had visited the
Right.
Live Production Summit out in Palm Springs was this past year, and it just felt more of like a social event.
Yes.
Low key
With some conversations.
Yeah, and nobody's there with an ego.
No.
It's just everybody's there to talk to each other,
Yeah.
to offer advice, to here's how I did it. How do you, when you guys are well, how many years have you been with Live Production Summit now? What number of years?
So it started right before the pandemic. 19 was the first year of the rebranding of LPS when we were still in Arizona, just for a stint. And then we did the virtual one during the pandemic and then came out of it. So it was 19 is when I started.
So take us a little bit about behind the scenes into those meeting rooms when you guys are in those initial discussions of, you got the next LPS Summit coming up, and what kind of topics you want to hit and what kind of, talks you want to have.
Sure.
How do you develop those subjects and make it broad enough so that you do have people from theater, from churches, from concert touring, all wanting to come in and
part of it is being here now. We're constantly trying to keep up on what's going on, who's talking about what. And you have the staples, right? So we have our emerging tech, which last year we had Miguel from Holoplot, and we had Dan Potter from Creative Works London and things like that. And lighting, of course, we had Rob Koenig and such. And so those are staple conversations. Now, the title may say what it is, design, but we don't in any way micromanage the content of that conversation. What it is all those lighting designers and what have you get together and they talk about what's pressing to them. We don't agree with the idea of a set agenda in these conversations because you could then lose hot topics, right? So if it's a communal conversation, and conversations will have their own natural death, if you will. If it's talked out, it's talked out. Somebody brings up the next idea. So instead of having people just sit there and going through the antiquated PowerPoint of we're going to talk about this for 5 minutes and that for 5 minutes, and there's a clock running and a stage manager saying next topic, no.
Right.
We're not going to do that. We want you to be able to talk about what you want to talk about, what's important to you. And it doesn't matter if you think it's rudimentary or if it's too advanced. Look, there's going to be somebody there that's either going to get something out of it or have something also to offer on it. So we don't in any way push it like that. We create the natural platforms. Mm-hmm. And then we also get approached by people that say, Chris, I'm noticing this trend and I really want to discuss this. It's like, okay, great. You know what I mean? But it's also on the people themselves to say, hey, I'm going to be going and I want to talk about this with everybody. And it kind of happens organically on that front. So
right.
I'm a firm believer that the antiquated views of how to do this, of being under a rigid schedule and rigid set conversations, kind of lose the plot in a little bit, in my opinion. Because you could be stagnating. 9 times out of 10 at these events, the people in the crowd are smarter than the ones on the stage. Don't take them out of the conversation. You know what I mean? And I'm not in any way being derogatory to the people that we're so incredibly lucky to have that volunteered to do it. But I also love that most of them say, you know what, let's not do the stage. Let's just gather in this room, and it doesn't need to be a stage. And we call them, and it's kind of coined, John Featherstone was part of this conversation. They're conversation curators. They're not moderators. They're not leading. They're just people with that tenacity that are able and willing to, if it lulls or it needs a topic, they'll get one going. You know what I mean?
I was actually in on one of the talks that Featherstone was doing, and that's exactly how it was. It was Featherstone up front, and I think he had the other guys from Light Switch there with him.
Yeah, that was the focused opportunity. That was a Light Switch predominant presented
and
thing.
They immediately turned it over to the audience and said, we're not going to talk at you. We want to talk with you. We want this to be a cooperative.
And that's the LPS vibe. It's with you. It's everybody with, And when I started the Future Forward program to get all the students there, it was for that same reason. And we invite educators alike. So the Future Forward program allows any student or educator free attendance to LPS, and we'll feed them. And luckily, we get a lot of sponsors that will pitch in and say, you know what, we're going to donate this much to go towards hotel rooms for the students, and we'll push that route and get them involved because, again, they're your next tech, they're your next boss, they're the next innovation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're the next labor, whatever they're going to be. Don't keep them out of the conversation. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Bring them in, and the educators alike. Because the educator, if you've been in a classroom for 5 years and you haven't been out here, you may pick up on some stuff, and reinvigorate yourself. And we want that. That's part of the future. So I wanted to make sure that students had an easy route. And it's already hard enough. It's a resort in Palm Springs. We know there's costs associated. But which is why we negotiate our room rate is less than $300 a night. We include all that food in it, to try and make it as accessible out of any of them, and make sure that students don't have to worry about, registration costs. They're never going to have one with us.
Yeah. So what's the future of Live Production Summit look like? How far you want to go with this? How big you want to make it? What's that grand scheme?
It's kind of not how big I want to make it, right? Because again, I'm called the director, but really I'm at the behest of the industry. What does the industry want to talk about? What does the industry need? Where does the industry want to grow?
Yeah.
And it's all those facets. Again, it's broadcast, it's corporate, it's touring, it's, municipal events. It's all of those involved, which we definitely want to bring them more together, because some of those silos that don't exist still exist in some people's ideas of them. You know what I mean? And we need to get rid of that. We need the touring people to know that, look, you can transition to a vendor at home and just do municipal stuff around there or corporate stuff. You're still going to be mixing audio or running lights or doing whatever, but
Right.
You could end up with that insurance that you need if you're about to have a child, you know what I mean, and not have to travel as much, but still doing what you love. You know what I mean? There are transitions capable out there. And the same, there's some people that I know that work at corporate environments that would love to get on the road. That was their dream of why they got in, but they took, what they called the safe way, what have you. And part of it also for the future is pushing more of that education again. To me, it's education. I'm always looking to learn. You know what I mean? More and more stuff. I might not tour anymore. You know what I mean? I don't run. I still go out and do some shows. Like the most recent I've been doing was I was PM for the Dallas Rodeo for a couple of years, and things like that. And I got back out there and loved it. 175 trucks of dirt and whatever else, and let's go kind of thing. And that was through OSA and stuff. But as you start pushing the education side, we also start learning more about what's coming through that. You know what I mean? And so the innovation with the education is really what I want to see. Back again, like I said, I'm a Toys R Us kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I may not be a lighting guy, but there's some lighting stuff that's getting pretty cool. It's like, all right, where's this going?
And the technology, I like that you're focused on that education part, because the technology is just advancing so quickly.
It is.
You look back where we started in 70s, 80s, really, when production started to really take off to where we are now. And, where you're talking about AI, kind of, especially in the audio world. I mean, AI and audio is big. Well,
AI and content, AI and audio, but also AI even, I've been seeing people are like using AI to design a festival look or a festival layout or a festival kind of theme and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Even conference setups, AI can be used on that. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to go, but I'm also a little concerned. We live in a very litigious society. It's moving really quick. Where's the ownership lie? How's this going to play out?
Are we asking, should we, before we do it?
Well, we never do that though, right? We always dive in and see what's going to come out of it. But if you notice, even like, let's take entertainers. Artists are already concerned about AI as far as replacing their image or sounding like them, because people say, okay, and I'll just use, for example, make this song sound like Taylor Swift and kind of her vibe, and all of a sudden there it pops out, okay?
Right.
Well, actually, of course that's damaging to their product, which is Taylor. She's a product, I mean? And I don't mean that, again, in a derogatory manner, but let's take it from the business sense, okay?
Right.
It's a package. So there is danger to that. And the concern, again, is, okay, well, how do you go after somebody? Who owns it? How do you now own what AI will create of you? And is it really you or just based upon you? Because some would say the argument would be, okay, well, they're influenced by such and such. I'm using them as an influence to create this. You see, and the gray area is very gray and very murky. So I'm really curious to see how that pans out. But I'm also waiting to see when the boom comes. Pandemic caused a lot of, actually, we saw the supply chain issues. We saw issues with chips, right?
Right.
Now everybody's saying, okay, we're back, we're going to do this, and that. My belief is it takes several years to create a metric. right? So I'm saying 26, 27 before we could say. The first year back was a scrub year, make up this, trying to get that. The next year was still figuring out, do we have gear or not have gear?
Right.
So this really is the start, and it's going to take X amount of years to see what holds, to look at what metrics we have. Hopefully in the next 5 years, we'll start seeing some of the brainstorming that took on in the pandemic come to fruition in actual product. A lot of great ideas because people that were home able to take things apart and come up with ideas. That's all they had time to do, right?
Right.
When do we see that come to fruition? And that can be exciting. There's a lot of NDAs flying. There's a lot of talk of this coming, that coming. I'm really looking forward to okay, well, what's coming?
Everybody has their NDAs that they like people to sign.
Well, look,
here's what we got. Here's what you got.
Any NDA, any contract, it's only worth the money you have to enforce or defend it.
Right.
At the end of the day,
I think a lot of times we just want to take people at their word, and
it's well, you kind of have to, even with an NDA, right? It's really, but morals.
We
and
understand
ethics,
that it's a small industry we live in.
Yes.
People talk. People have known each other for years.
That's right.
We just hope for the best.
Yeah. And that's the other side of the LPS side is we want everybody to come together and talk,
Right.
because it's healthy for everybody. Look, let's take vendors, for example. All vendors sub-rent from each other, right? So there isn't this competitive, you can't, but behind the scenes, you need them to help you do this gig and vice versa and everything else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't hurt for us all to get together and talk about what are our labor strains, what are our logistics strains, and there's a lot of changes coming in logistics, right? The DOT is constantly making changes that affect us. The ebb and flow of staff at this point and labor's a big issue right now. We're seeing a lot of labor companies pop up trying to mitigate that. But what's the quality of labor that we're getting, and what are we paying for that labor, right?
Yeah.
Then we're also seeing this monopolization, if you will, taking place in certain facets of a lot of acquisitions becoming behemoths. And some people unaware that, well, I'm still going to that company because I don't like that company, unaware, well, that company owns that company.
Now they do.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're just keeping the name for 3 years for the transition of marketing, right?
Right.
But if that continues, then I have to ask, okay, how many companies are going to be left to get a bid from? You know what I mean? If you just end up with these big conglomerates, we've seen what happens in other industries. What's going to happen in this industry?
Yeah.
So I think we need to be cognizant of that as an industry, that, some of the regional companies and the smaller companies, what have you, are, if they go away, we're shooting ourselves in the foot on competition. Competition's healthy. Competition spurns innovation, right?
Absolutely.
We need that. We can't just be, two houses that run the industry. That, to me, that's not good for the industry.
No, that would get boring real fast.
Not only would it get boring, it's you have no wherewithal on your pricing at that point. You're beholden to what it's going to be. I won't bring up any names, but we know one company that if you go to certain locations, you have to use that company, and you're beholden to their price points, and that aren't necessarily realistic.
Yeah, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the Live Production Summit was that when you come to shows like this, people, they have their shirts on with their company name, and it's kind of like, we're Robe, you're that company, you're this company, you're this company.
Yeah.
But at LPS, it was more of just a stripped down vibe where it wasn't about what company you're with. It was about who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
And that was more of a much more of a relaxed feeling.
Right.
And
that's why I
didn't
said
have that sort of trade show sort of vibe.
No, we're going more for vibe. That's really what we're going. Now we had, as you saw, the small trade show floor that we do, and we're gonna keep that. But walking in what that's going to be, what I mean? And the people walking in. So, the idea was, when you walk the halls and there's signage everywhere and we call it walking the gauntlet, so to speak. You got all the people at the table and you're polite by nature, and they come out going, hey, how you doing? And you spend 5 minutes to realize there's never going to be any synergy. There is no business. You're never going to use each other's product. But getting through that gauntlet just cost you 20 minutes. It's fatiguing. Yeah. So if you notice at LPS, none of that signage is there. None of it is there, even in the food, it's just not there. But we have an area for that. You can go in there. The focus opportunities, like what Light Switch, we were very thrilled that they offered, was you walk in, you're walking into Light Switch. And you're going to hear from Light Switch. And yet John and them, and I love them, they get it in the sense of no, they wanted to use that opportunity to talk to everybody else.
He turned that conversation, the moment it started, he turned that conversation around to the room and said, it's not about us, it's about everybody here.
It's a great learning opportunity for vendors and manufacturers alike, right? You've got a room full of that kind of talent.
Yeah.
to get their feedback on just the general side of the industry, not just product base. Look, data is worth more than oil. You know what I mean? So how often can you use a resource like that and get a conversation and really see what the end users are talking about? It's one thing to sit in a boardroom, design a product or an idea, and then get your marketing in place and try to push it to everybody. How often do you actually get the time to hear it from them and get that feedback of like, look, we need something that's going to do this, or we're worried about this, or what have you?
Yeah.
That's invaluable, really. You know what I mean? There's a lot to it.
But it's clear you love this industry. I mean, you talk about,
it's events, right?
Loving
We're
it
you know what?
on
We're
the
the
road
smiles and cries of a Friday or Saturday night, right?
Yeah.
That's what we are.
So what is it? What is it about, you talk about the education side of it that you enjoy. You talked about, I mean, the fact that you created these, trauma kits and defibrillators and put them out there, for people to be safe because you care about the people that are out there. I mean, there's obviously a love for this industry that you show for it. What is it? Where does that love come from?
When I was touring, and I'd get asked this a lot by a lot of the kids coming up, for me it was the 8 seconds. It's the only way I can explain it. It's the 8 seconds. And that 8 seconds is when I call for house lights to drop. There's 8 seconds, and it is tangible feeling of the crowd excitement. Everybody knows it's about to hit. And when that downbeat hits, and that shows that 8 seconds leading up to that, it's like that elusive golf swing, right?
I know all about that.
Right, all right. So for years, for me, really what kept me going was that 8 seconds. To feel that crowd and everybody in that place at that moment with that excitement level for art. That's big. That's big.
So if you could go back to that nightclub back in LA before young Chris and his friends decided to break in and you stopped them on the street, what advice would you give young Chris? Would you tell him, go ahead and break in?
Do it. It wasn't really, I wouldn't say felonious breaking in, but yeah, we went in. But it was a different time and a different era back then.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
you could get away with some stuff.
Well, and there's 6 degrees of separation or less, especially in certain communities in LA at that time. Like, especially, let's say, Malibu, for instance. Everybody knew each other. You know what I mean? Everybody knew what was going on. So it wasn't, like we're going to go in there and destroy this legendary place. We were young, we were stupid, and it was legendary. You know what I mean? And that's what it was. But it set me on a path to travel the world. It set me on a path to meet some of the most exciting artists and people that I could never have dreamt of. And I've got to work with some absolute legends. One of the people I learned the most from was Dickie Betts from the Allman Brothers. You know what I mean? One of the most well-read conversationalists I've ever spent time with, Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys. One of the most intriguing bands when I toured with Killing Joke. You know what I mean? The lead singer runs the Prague Philharmonic. You know what I mean? The bass player is arguably one of the top producers in the world. Produced Paul McCartney, Pink Floyd. You know what I mean? But by day he's in this kind of 80s punk band, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at who you get to work with and the places you get to go all around the world to put on these shows and create that 8 seconds for people all around the world, look, it's a special job. It's a special job. Now, I'm not in any way going to sugarcoat and say it's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. There are things, that concern me about people coming into the future. Like I'm trying to explain to those that just want to be their own. It's like, okay, well, you're deciding to be a business. Understand this now, that you may not get all the business you need that year. You can't expect a handout from somebody. The government or the industry doesn't owe you anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you decide to be independent, well, then you're a business, and it's your job to market, get enough business to get what you need for the year. If you decide to go that route.
Yeah.
Or you need to become an employee of a vendor or something else. But, in touring per se, a lot of them are independents. They're their own. Well, what if you don't get a tour? What if that tour cancels? Well, that's the choice you made.
All right.
And I think we need to be very clear about that with the generation coming up, because a lot of them, I think, have a misunderstanding of that, which is why at LPS we brought that financial aspect in. We had an insurance company and a financial company talking about, look.
Yeah, that was big. That was really interesting, because I've never seen anybody put that knowledge in front of the younger kids the way that you do.
I felt it was important for them to have an understanding of, like, look, S Corp and C Corp or DBA or this compared to a 1099 compared to being an employee of W-2. It's having the fundamental knowledge of that is important. I mean, in school right now, our history books still say Columbus discovered America. When we know he never stepped foot in North America, he wasn't necessarily a good guy, right?
Right.
So, and we got rid of home ec, right? So these kids aren't learning that aspect anymore.
Right.
And when you come into this industry, it's important. And also is, your errors and omissions insurance. People don't know what it is, don't know why they should have it. It's like, look, if you screw up a show that's worth $1 million, there might be a day somebody's going to come after you for it. So you need to be cognizant of that. You're not going to have your own health insurance as an independent. What's that going to run you? You know what I mean? So we need to educate on that side. And if we're not educating, we can't complain about it. And I don't claim myself to be the educator, but I would love to be that part of LPS that brings people in that can be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we're lucky to have some staples. Cosmo Wilson is a staple, and he's such an incredible human being, and he's all about education. Rob Koenig, incredible human being, all about education. Chad Olick, great human being, all about education. And these are people that just volunteer their time because they're coming anyways as attendees are like, no, I want to teach. This is important. Let's go. John Featherstone, the likes, Robe, everybody that came in, it's like, okay. And that's where we also want our sponsors to, if they become a sponsor, if they have an education aspect to it, we give the focus room. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, please. Especially if it's education-based. Netgear came in and was, showing off theirs. Does it show their product? Absolutely. But is it educational? Yes. And with the amount of students we get, you never know. Again, going back to what I said earlier, they walk into an audio room. If they're a true audio person, they go, yes. They walk into a lighting room and see it, yes.
Yeah.
We have to create those environments that allow them to choose that. They don't get that in the classroom. So I think it's important to continue that scope. The rest of us are set. Where's the future business?
Yeah.
You got to look over the shoulder of the person you have now. Who's coming up?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what LPS is for.
Chris, thank you very much for taking the time to sit and chat with us.
Of course.
I had a great time at LPS. I can't wait to go again next year. And I really applaud the work that you guys are doing. Anything here in Vegas you're gonna check out while you're here in town, or we talked a little bit about it. You said you're not much of a Vegas.
I'm not. Look, they don't build these places because you win. So I'm here more for tech. I want to see the tech, and I also want to hear what people are, where their concerns lie, where are our pinch points, what do we need to work on, what do we need to educate on.
Right.
Again, what's the future path? I'm always looking for that path. It's like if you're going to show me a speaker, it's like, okay, well, I've seen a lot of speakers. What's special about this? There's not a lot of secrets in the industry when you get to a certain point, unless it's all of a sudden groundbreaking innovation.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeking, always.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
very much for sitting time and chatting with us.
Sure.
Remember, you can catch Robe Chats, the podcast, on all your favorite podcasting platforms. You can also watch us on YouTube, and we'll sign off the way we always do. May the light always shine your way. You can make it the Robe way. Have a great day.